Russia's economy is teetering on the edge as it grapples with a perfect storm of crises. Skyrocketing food prices, a collapsing civilian sector, and a severe labor shortage are exposing the cracks in the Kremlin's ambitious agenda. With inflation soaring and industries struggling, how long can Moscow sustain its war-driven priorities? This is UATV, and you're in Focus, where we dive into the critical global shifts shaping our world today. In 2024, Russian companies faced a staggering shortfall of 2.2 million workers, the worst labor crisis since 2008. From drivers and mechanics to farmers and builders, the demand for workers has surged, forcing employers to rely heavily on migrant labor despite growing xenophobia and restrictive policies.
In 2024, Russian companies faced a shortage of 2.2 million workers. This is official data from the Federal State Statistics Service. The labor shortage was the highest since the crisis of 2008. Last year, companies in the country urgently needed drivers, mechanics, engineers, farmers, and builders.
The shortage, according to the Federal State Statistics Service, affected nearly all professions, but the market is most acutely in need of unskilled workers. Demand for many blue-collar specialties has grown by more than 1.5 times since 2022. This is evidenced by the increase in median salaries and the number of vacancies on the largest job aggregator, H.ru. Couriers, installers, and auto mechanics now earn 100,000 rubles, on par with art directors and architects, in a publication by Novaya Gazeta Europe.
According to preliminary forecasts by the central bank, in the first quarter of 2025, the labor shortage approached the highest level in the history of observations. Widespread mobilization, high employment in the military-industrial complex, and migration of Russian citizens who disagree with Kremlin policies, even raising salaries in certain industries does not help attract Russians to work. Recruiting migrants comes to the rescue.
While security forces lobby for anti-migrant laws, the market desperately needs cheap labor, and this outweighs political considerations. Thus, in 2023 to 2024, employers began trying to attract foreigners 3 times more often. Foreigners are most often banned from working as drivers, salespeople, and couriers, precisely the sectors with many migrants. And these are the sectors experiencing a massive labor shortage, in a publication by Novaya Gazeta Europe.
Anti-migrant sentiments are not uncommon in Russian society. From time to time, they flare up in the Federation with renewed vigor, fueled by officials, deputies, and security forces. Experts believe that, for example, claims that migrant couriers deliver drugs and hit pedestrians on the roads are needed by the authorities to portray themselves as protectors of Russians from fictitious threats posed by foreigners, writes Novaya Gazeta Europe. Meanwhile, their share in overall crime consistently does not exceed 5%. The anti-migrant movement in Russia gained new momentum after the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack in 2024. Within 6 months of the incident, courts ordered the deportation of about 86,000 foreigners.
I've been here since 2016. I periodically went back home, but realizing there's no work there, I returned again and again. After Crocus, new bans appear every day. Before, I worked in warehouses, taxis, and marketplaces. Now, I work at a construction site in Moscow. They can stop you on the street for no reason, demand documents. If something's missing, they deport you immediately. It even happens that as soon as you leave the country, they put you on the deportation list without explanation. It feels like they just don't want to see us here. Migrant from Tajikistan, speaking anonymously, in an interview with Deutsche Welle.
Work or fight, another lure for foreigners in the Russian Federation is a contract with the Ministry of Defense. Often alongside a passport, yesterday's migrants are handed conscription notices to fill gaps in the troops.
Citizens of Central Asian countries, particularly Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, are increasingly becoming targets of forced mobilization carried out by Russian security forces. This primarily concerns labor migrants arriving in Russia in search of work. Representatives of the Russian army mislead foreigners with promises of quick earnings through short-term contracts. In reality, the chances not only of earning, but also of surviving, are minimal. Most of these volunteers die. Main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on Facebook.
Despite xenophobia within Russian society, the risk of mobilization, and economic difficulties, the Federation remains the top destination for labor migrants from Central Asian countries. The main reason is knowledge of the Russian language, experts believe. However, in recent years, due to the above reasons, guest workers are increasingly choosing Arab states, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and Germany. Reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
At the same time, Russia's civilian industries are reeling from the economic fallout of its ongoing war, with food prices, like the so-called borscht set, jumping by 87% and car sales plummeting. Even giants like AvtoVAZ are slashing salaries and cutting work weeks, signaling deeper troubles ahead.
Back to the USSR. In attempts to combat the economic crisis, Russian authorities are increasingly turning to the experience of the Communist Party, a surge in inflation, trillion-ruble investments in continuing the full-scale war against Ukraine, and problems with the harvest have led to a sharp rise in food prices. Vegetables from the so-called borscht set alone have risen in price by about 87% over the year. The Russian Ministry of Agriculture has decided to take pricing into its own hands. The ministry is considering two options for regulation.
According to the first option, in 2026, at least 80% of sales will consist of goods purchased by retail chains through direct long-term contracts with fixed prices. The parties will be able to revise them no more than once a year, and it will be impossible to terminate the contract out of court. A stricter option is also being considered, under which the state will set the minimum and maximum retail prices for 80% of products. Goods such as potatoes, carrots, cabbage, beets, tomatoes, onions, milk, eggs, sugar, apples, cucumbers, and sunflower oil may fall under regulation, from a publication by the Moscow Times.
Prices keep rising, while salaries keep falling. As Russia's military-industrial complex grows, civilian industry sectors are suffering. For example, Russia's largest automaker, AvtoVAZ, is cutting employee salaries. The reason is a sharp drop in car sales and overstocked warehouses. Salary cuts will amount to at least 20%, and the plant will switch to a 4-day work week by the end of September.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
In addition to one working day, workers will also lose overtime, for which they received bonuses, a source at AvtoVAZ told MASH. Because of this, many are planning to submit resignation letters, the source added. According to Autostat, in the first 6 months of 2025, the Russian car market collapsed by 28%. A total of 530,000 new passenger cars were sold, from a publication by the Moscow Times. It has already been more or less acknowledged that we only have some remnants of growth in the military sector as long as there are budget funds. Everything related to the civilian sector is going into the negative. Rosstat, firstly, released industrial data for June. There's a 2% growth in annual terms. This is, firstly, worse than forecasts, and secondly, with seasonality removed, it's minus 1.7%. Industry is completely losing optimism, and enterprises are planning to reduce output, meaning this trend will continue. And another very important point is that the entire civilian industry is in the negative.
The flooding of the market with Chinese goods is also affecting the decline in Russian production. Russian authorities were forced to close the market to the most popular Chinese trucks after a collapse in sales of domestic brands.
According to Rosstat, in the first half of the year, Russia produced almost a quarter fewer trucks than the previous year, and sales, according to Autostat, fell by about half. After the start of the war and the departure of leading global brands, Chinese trucks captured 2/3 of the Russian market, from a publication by the Moscow Times.
The decline in oil and gas revenues is also impacting the state of the Russian economy. In the first 7 months of 2025, Moscow exported 4% less oil than in the same period in 2024, writes Bloomberg.
Compared to the same period last year, the volume of supplies decreased by approximately 140,000 barrels per day, almost 30 million barrels in total. They are 7% lower compared to the same period in 2023, and it's not just about reduced exports. Oil refining at refineries has also slightly decreased compared to last year. The flow of Russian oil could face a new blow if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose secondary tariffs on all exports to the U.S. from buyers of this country's oil, from a publication by Bloomberg.
This leads to the depletion of the National Welfare Fund, which the Kremlin boasted about. The NWF could be completely exhausted in 2026 if oil prices remain low and the ruble stays strong, experts predict. As of June 1st, the fund had 2,800 billion rubles left, the lowest level since 2019. Since then, the volume of reserves has decreased more than twofold in rubles and threefold in dollars, reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
As Russia's economy buckles under inflation, labor shortages, and industrial decline, the Kremlin's focus on military might comes at a steep cost to its people. Can Moscow reverse this downward spiral, or will these crises reshape its future? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay with UATV for more In Focus, where we keep you informed on the stories that matter.